Welcome to the Indigenous Health and Wellbeing Colloquium series that's sponsored by the Harvard University Native American Program, as well as the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine at Harvard Medical School. My name is Joseph Gahn, and I am a psychologist and interdisciplinary social scientist, also a professor at Harvard now for nearly 8 years. I'm the faculty director of the Harvard University Native American Program, and I'm a mental health researcher who's been interested in studying and exploring and explaining Indigenous mental health concerns throughout my career. And so it's been my pleasure to go ahead and sponsor this colloquium series in which we explore mental health research in Indigenous communities. I should start by explaining that Harvard University is governed by its Charter of 1650, which commits our institution to, quote, the education of the English and Indian youth of this country. This colloquium series was inaugurated in February of 2021. Today, I think, is our 14th seminar, for which I'm pleased to welcome a team of 3 speakers, Drs. D'Amico, Dickerson, and Johnson. Elizabeth D'Amico is a senior behavioral scientist at RAND and a licensed clinical psychologist. She's developed interventions for Native American adolescents and emerging adults in urban settings that integrate traditional practices. She also developed a virtual intervention that uses a strength-based, culturally grounded approach for Alaska Native young people focused on suicide prevention and alcohol use. Daniel Dickerson is an addiction psychiatrist and associate research psychiatrist at UCLA Integrated Substance Abuse Programs. His research focuses on the development and analysis of substance use treatment and prevention programs for American Indian, Alaska Native youth and adults. Carrie Johnson is Chief Executive Officer of Sacred Path Indigenous Wellness Center, an organization dedicated to serving urban Native Americans. Dr. Johnson is involved with various local, countywide, and statewide advisory boards to increase the access to the cultural competence of services provided to Native Americans. It's my pleasure to welcome this team. We haven't had a team present before, so we're really pleased to have each of you join us. Thank you for doing that. And I also just want to give a shout out to Dr. Dickerson, who offered me one of the very first invited speaking opportunities I had early in my career when you were at Yale and had me come out there. So it's really good to have you back with us today. The presenters will talk to us today about, quote, traditions and connections for urban Native Americans, TACUNA, reaching emerging adults nationally through a virtually delivered randomized controlled trial. This is especially exciting because randomized controlled trials in the field of mental health for Indigenous communities or populations or samples are really, really rare. And so they'll talk to us till maybe the top of the hour or so, and then we'll move to a half hour of audience exchange, as is our custom. Please note that you can post your questions and comments using the Q&A function in Zoom. So that's the best way to let us know that you have a question for our audience. And then when it comes time for us to do some exchange, I'll route and forward those questions to our folks who can answer. Keep in mind, this event is being recorded and will eventually be available for viewing on our HUNAP website, as are all of the other prior seminars. Our website is hunap.harvard.edu, so you can find us in that way. Fantastic. Well, please join me today then in welcoming this terrific team. And I'll now turn the floor over to Dr. Dickerson.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Gon. Ubango Uniarak, Sigavan Koya Miagro Wainwright. I'm Dan Dickerson. I'm a Nupiaq from the Sigavan family in Wainwright, Alaska. I'm an addiction psychiatrist and associate research psychiatrist at UCLA Integrated Substance Use and Addiction Programs, where I've been there since 2007. And it's such an honor to be invited. I'm speaking on behalf of our team, myself, Dr. D'Amico, Dr. Johnson, to be invited to present at this amazing series. We're honored to be able to share our work that we've conducted with urban communities across the U.S. for the past several years. You know, in conducting work with Native Americans, and I know many of you may be preaching to the choir here, but it definitely requires a large, comprehensive effort. You know, our people have undergone past unjust, unethical research, and so to develop new research paradigms that are responsive and that help to respond to the needs of our communities are unfortunately have not been done enough, but there's a lot of momentum, a lot of new research being conducted. So we're fortunate to be one of some studies that have been funded through the National Institutes of Health for Native Americans. So our research team, Dr. D'Amico and I have been multiple principal investigators on several research programs. I've had the honor of working with her for several years, and we've developed and have a team of researchers, many at RAND, that you see listed in this slide. And we have each one of our researchers really have amazing backgrounds and expertise in various areas of research. So we're able to really hone in on many needs of that exist. You know, there's a lot of gaps in knowledge as it relates to urban Native Americans. For example, with regard to, I'll just name a few: discrimination, cultural identity, how to develop cultural-based practices, you know, addressing the needs of urban people, learning about urban needs, and really taking that backseat approach as a research team to really try to be responsive in a culturally appropriate manner for urban Native Americans. And our advisory board, you know, to conduct successful research with Native Americans, it comes first from the community. We're merely mirroring what the community is requesting, and oftentimes it's using and integrating traditional practices. And we're fortunate to have an amazing elder advisory board who are well recognized in urban communities and who've done amazing work, and who include Benjamin Hale and Janet King in memory. So yes, we go to our elder advisory board for a variety of topics and concerns and challenges that might exist from A to Z, from recruitment to engagement of communities to any other challenge that might occur in our work. In being responsive to Native American communities, it's first important, we believe, and many Native American leaders and advocates, to really capitalize and recognize the role of resilience of our people that we've had as Native people for several centuries, you know, that really are grounded in our traditions and recognizing the four directions, the four dimensions of well-being, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and recognizing the impact that historical trauma has had in disrupting uh, to some degree our ability to live as we've had for many centuries. And that includes participating in traditional practices and learning about our culture, engaging with other Native people, and socially connecting with other Native people as well. Because unfortunately, due to in part historical trauma and these kind of issues with social disconnection and being under-recognized in healthcare arenas, you know, we've been disproportionately impacted by substance use. And more recently, with regard to the opioid epidemic, for example, urban people have about 1.5 times higher overdose rates. And as mentioned, you know, risk factors could be social disconnection, historical trauma, shortage of some services that might be hard to access, especially in large urban areas. And we're from the LA area, so we fully recognize how challenging and crazy the urban environment. I grew up in Long Beach here in LA County, so We really tried to use our understanding of urban areas to engage our communities as well, as long as use it with our elder advisory board. Because many people don't realize that 80% of urban Native Americans live in urban areas or off reservations, rancherias, and villages. And there's limited funding streams for treatment, prevention, and research. And with all that, there's been very few our knowledge of the needs of urban Native Americans is low. There's been limited research, our epidemiological studies, intervention studies, et cetera. So, and this includes randomized controlled trials. So we need more, randomized controlled trials to analyze potentially beneficial interventions that could be responsive to the needs of our people, our Native American people in urban areas. We can't just put a standard, typical general population approach. We really have to dig in and really do some qualitative work to really understand the needs of Native American people in urban areas, the challenges, what could be triggers to substance use, especially among young people, which our study focuses on. So yes, in a nutshell, and Dr. D'Amico will be presenting more on TACUNA and results from our study. But TACUNA are traditions and connections for urban Native Americans. This was developed in partnership with communities, with extensive focus groups, with our Elder Advisory Board and community partners. And it consists of 3 workshops are that are comprised of motivational interviewing and traditional practices. And we conducted these workshops specifically for urban young adults ages 18 to 25. In our study, we designed this prior to COVID-19, all prior to COVID-19. So initially, we drew up the study, we're funded for the study to be done in person in California only, in Southern, Northern, and Central California. In fact, we did our focus groups to begin with in these areas. But all of a sudden, as you all could remember, in about 2020 or so, everything changed dramatically with COVID-19. So everyone in research and in clinical delivery, we were kind of stopped there for a second to try to figure out new ways of delivering interventions. So we, in partnership with community partners, with our Elder Advisory Board, we were advised that what we could do is change our program and tailor it to a virtual format. So just before us packing our bags and jumping in the car and delivering interventions, in person in clinics, we pre-tested and we virtually tested our intervention with young adults to fine-tune our approach. So, for example, we had cooking, storytelling, and sage prayer, sage and ceremony, and we did this all virtually, standing in kitchens. So all of our participants standing in kitchens, their own kitchen, and kind of following along with cooking and learning about their traditions. So this took a lot of work, both in developing the virtual format and trying to think of ways to recruit and to do this totally from home. So with this approach, then we needed to think of ways to. Oh, by the way, so with our virtual approach, our Elder Advisory Board said, hey, we could do this on a broader scale. We could go national, actually. So we then had to figure ways because there's been a shortage of research on a national scale of randomized controlled trials to understand urban people and their response to interventions nationally. It hasn't been done to our knowledge. Virtual recruitment hasn't been done. So it was an opportunity to see if this kind of intervention can resonate more broadly. So we did a new recruitment approach. Nina Gugel from RAND did an amazing job. This was all prior. Now that AI is such a big thing. Just 5 years ago, it wasn't as big of a thing. Doing algorithms, trying to track ad statistics, trying to figure out what ads could work. Nina Gugel from RAND really took the lead on heading an approach that resulted in being able to design ads that that could help optimize response. So with these ads, we were able to figure out through algorithms and statistics what were working, what were not working, and what ads we should use. Sometimes we use certain ads that worked and then they kind of didn't work. So we would throw in a new ad and then we bring back another ad and we were able to kind of track ways to do this. And this was kind of new back in just 6 years ago in 2020. So now I imagine there's a lot more exciting things going on. And a lot of people have done this, by the way. So there's a special edition issue in American Indian, Alaska Native Mental Health Research Journal about virtual delivery of the law in Native American projects. So we did this during 2020, and then we did our first ad in California, Washington, Oregon, Minnesota in beginning of 2021. And then we expanded this to a national approach on social media. And instantly, by the end of the first week that we drew the ad, we had 141 screened in 1 week. So right away, we knew something was really successful here. Um, Although it may sound all perfect and all, definitely was not. We did have our challenges. We had some areas where time periods where we weren't recruiting as many individuals. And we also recognized a shortage of males in our studies. So we spoke with our community partners, and trying to figure out why that is. And we were fortunate to hire Paige Smith, amazing team member from Oregon, who helped develop ads for men, or to help target men to help increase that portion of our sample. In all, we were able to, even though we had an initial goal of 370 Native young adult participants, actually ended up recruiting 541. And Dr. D'Amico will be talking about that in just a few minutes. So you're probably wondering which ad was probably the most responsive. And this ad here was by far the most successful, had the most successful response. And we'll be curious what you all think why. It could be the design, the colors, somehow the presentation, but we use this ad. We always came back to this ad to if we needed to help increase recruitment. And here's some examples of Paige Smith. He's photogenic as well as we took photos, great photos of himself. What better choice? This really helped. The kind of focus on males and having depicting more males and ads were really we felt a way to go. And looking back, it's a learning expedition, this whole project. This a quick learning expedition. And probably we recognize some other studies that who were, maybe more successful. They really emphasize the need to really show the importance of males being involved in culture and their communities and family and the resilience. So I think we think more research is needed to find ways to recruit more males into studies. So these are some final in my portion of our presentation numbers of our of clicks. You can see we had 385,000 impressions, 259,000 reach, 780 followers, lots of clicks. So we feel that the recruitment part helped to bring people into the study and hopefully then be able to be with other Native people because we felt that with urban areas, oftentimes we're community may not be as connected. So one of the impetus for this study was to help young adults in the urban areas be able to not only participate in the culture, but to also connect with others, make new healthy connections, and learn from each other, and have someone who is maybe in their same shoes, so to speak. So yes, thank you all. Next will be Elizabeth, Dr. D'Amico.
Thanks, Dan. It's really an honor to be here to share this journey with you all. I think, Dr. Dickerson tells a really important story of the importance of how we work in communities and the amount of time and effort we take to ensure that things are a fit for the community, that people are comfortable. This gold standard, as Dr. Gahn mentioned, of doing randomized clinical trials is really difficult when you work in communities because, quite frankly, no one wants to be a quote control group. And so you have to think very carefully about how you're going to do the research. And I've been working in communities for over 20 years. As a clinical psychologist trying to develop interventions that when the grant funding ends and the money's gone, they can be sustainable and feasible. And I think what is beautiful about this project is because of COVID and having to think about things, we actually ended up really creating something amazing. Um, so Dr. Dickerson showed this project snapshot, and what I want to highlight on this is that every single young person in our study received a cultural workshop. So there was no control group. Everyone received something. So half of our sample received one workshop focused on cultural health and wellness. This was taken from SAMHSA work from the Technology Center for Native Americans and really focused on education and culture. The other half of the sample received TACUNA, Traditions and Connections for Urban Native Americans, which was 3 workshops and integrated motivational interviewing with culture. So it had a lot more cultural practices, as Dr. Dickerson talked about. And then we followed all these young people for 1 year. What's really important about this intervention, and Dr. Dickerson said this, but Dr. Johnson, he and I have been working together for over 15 years to really think about how to develop programming for young people that fits for their developmental age by integrating both motivational interviewing and culture and really thinking about how we can focus on traditional practices and also understand how to make healthy choices around substances. So TACUNA was culturally grounded in the medicine wheel to focus on different areas, including a behavioral focus, a physical focus, and a spiritual focus. We spent a lot of time in these workshops also talking with young people about their social networks. Excuse me. We know that peers can influence our choices both in to increase risk and increase support. And so we created these social network diagrams to really show people their networks so they could see who in their network might be increasing risk by using substances and where they could go to get support for those who might be engaging in traditional practices. So when we created these workshops, it wasn't just, let's do some motivational interviewing and let's do some culture. We really integrated these together to think about what this needed to look like. And we spent a year working with communities, as Dr. Dickerson mentioned, doing focus groups with young people, providers, parents, our elder advisory board, to really understand what the cultural activities were that they would want to do and how to integrate that with talking about healthy choices around substances. So workshop one really focused on connecting journeys and this digital storytelling of your heritage and your identity. And that was integrated with motivational interviewing, thinking about your identity and your networks and who are you with and how does that focus on your identity and how does that, relate to the choices you make around substances. Workshop two focused on healthy choices around food and how do you make healthy choices. And Dan didn't get into this, but imagine we had to go from cooking in person to cooking virtually. So in order to make this work, we actually sent these amazing, what I'll call goodie packages to every participant. So before the workshops, they received this big box of TACUNA swag and things for the workshops. So ingredients to make Three Sister Stew, sage that was handpicked by Sacred Path Indigenous Wellness Center and bundled, and handouts that talked about the different things we were going to talk about. So I think it made it really exciting for participants to get this box of goodies before the workshops. So workshop two focused on cooking, and we did this virtual cooking in everyone's kitchens. And then it focused on the path of choices. And how do you make choices on this path around substances? And if you are using substances and you don't want to, how do you get off that pathway? Workshop three focused on creating a spiritual life and had a sage ceremony, and then focused on where do you want to be in your life in terms of choices around substances. And what was also amazing was just having people be able to be part of this virtually. We really didn't know what this was going to look like. And it really actually, people were connecting virtually. It was amazing. We also had planned these in-person wellness circles that had to go online as well. So what we did was plan these once a month wellness circles that TACUNA participants were asked to attend, but anyone could attend them. They were open to the community. Here's a couple examples of the wellness circles we held. One was with George Funmaker, who was one of our facilitators, focused on healing through native song and dance. Another was with the great grandson of Chief Sitting Bull, who talked about his life and the choices he's had to make over his life. So the wellness circles really focused on culture and healthy choices. And it was awesome because it was open to the community. We had so many people. We had Native American magicians. We had a Native American skateboarder, different influencers. They were really quite fun and a lot of people attended. So it was a great way, again, for people to connect if you think about the social network piece, which is what we were really trying to do. Dr. Dickerson talked about how the workshops changed from in person to virtual, but as you all remember, this was like unfolding and unfolding, and we were recruiting for several years, and things started to open up. And guess what? Young people wanted to go outside. We all did, right? We're like, I don't want to be on Zoom anymore. No more Zoom. So we were having trouble with retention in a lot of our workshops, and we said, what do we have to do? So we had a lot of qualitative responses around workshops, and we were able to look at those and see that a lot of young people were like, oh, we need to make this shorter. We also did 10 qualitative interviews for young people who weren't able to come, who also told us if it was shorter, I could come. So we all worked together to take this 2-hour workshop, 1 hour MI, 1 hour culture, and reduce it to 30 minutes MI and 30 minutes culture. So really trying to pick what we thought were the juicy, meaty parts. And it was really hard, but we thought it was very important to do this. Because we made this change, as you might imagine, this introduced another condition. into our study, where now we have to compare 1 hour versus 2 hour. But this was really critical because it's important for the community and for us to know for feasibility whether it, do you need 2 hours or can you do it in 1 hour? And so because of that, we were able to get supplemental funding from the National Institute of Drug Abuse to recruit more young people to be able to test this out. So what I want to talk about now is a little bit about the sample. Dr. Dickerson mentioned this, but this is the largest study to date of a randomized controlled trial with urban Native American people. And the geographic representation is amazing. We had young people across 37 states attend these workshops. Yes, I see the surprise face. It was amazing. We would listen to these workshops and we would have people on from Hawaii, Alaska, Florida, California, all young people in urban areas, all talking about similar issues. Like it's hard to connect. I'm having a hard time finding resources. And so that was actually really cool because they could see that other people were experiencing this across the country and really think together like, well, how can we get more resources? And so it's not just me, it's not just, in the state of Texas. And so that was amazing to listen to all of those. Here's some of the sample characteristics of the sample. If you recall, we're recruiting young people between the ages of 18 and 25. It was around an average age of 22, and Dr. Dickerson mentioned we had many more participants identify as female in the study. I think another important part of this is we had a lot of young people who reported sexual and gender diverse identity. And we talked a lot about this with other organizations who indicated that they also tended to have more females participate in their programs in this age range, and also more two-spirit people, which we thought was really interesting. And I bring this up because we have another program called TACUNA, which is motivational interviewing and culture for urban Native American youth. And that program's for 14 to 18-year-olds. And when we did that trial, it was about 50-50 for males and females. And part of that probably has to do with maybe parents taking their child to the program. And so this 18 to 25 age group is really different developmentally. And that's important when we think about our programming. Another thing I want to point out on here is that the alcohol and cannabis use, the number of times people used in the past 3 months was pretty similar. What you'll notice, however, is that when people used, they experienced a lot more consequences from cannabis. And this is really important because we know the way cannabis is marketed, the way people think about cannabis as a safe plant, is very different than how alcohol is marketed. And we're seeing this across all of our studies with young people where there are more consequences happening from this type of use. And this came up a lot in the workshops. And our facilitators were amazing being able to talk about this, and the differences with cannabis and alcohol. Another really important thing I want to point out is that many of the young people participated in cultural activities. You can see they participated in a wide range. These are different types of activities. And so they were participating in activities, and the program was a way to hopefully increase that participation. And then finally, many of them reported experiencing clinically significant depression or anxiety. So using substances and also having some mental health issues. So now I want to talk about the outcomes. Now remember that we are comparing here those who did TACUNA to those who did the health and wellness workshop. So again, there's no control group. And I'm just going to show a few graphs here, but I'll kind of give you the big story up front. The big picture is that everyone did better 1 year later across all of our outcomes. It was stunning what we saw. So sometimes we saw improvements for both groups, and sometimes we saw more improvements in TACUNA, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But overall, it is amazing that this virtual, short, brief program could have this kind of effect 1 year later. So in terms of positive depression screens, we saw that both groups decreased having a positive depression screen, which is pretty huge if you think about this over a year. They also reported much fewer consequences related to alcohol. In addition, we saw lower rates of alcohol use disorder, which was impressive in both groups as well. We saw lower use of cannabis, so less frequency of cannabis use. We also saw fewer cannabis consequences for both groups and lower cannabis use disorder for both groups. For TACUNA, we saw some improvements for some specific things. We saw more improvements focused on alcohol use in terms of the number of days of drinking, the largest number of drinks, so people were not drinking as heavily, which is important. So we're trying to reduce these kind of higher risk things. We also saw the quantity of cannabis. We asked people for flower or bud how many grams they used. And we saw the quantity of cannabis really decrease for this group, which again is another risk factor. We know that quantity can really affect things. Sometimes cannabis is getting really potent, and these things can really have some negative impacts. So we saw that as well. We also saw clinically significant improvements in anxiety that was only for the TACUNA group. And we saw improvements in the time they spent around peers who use cannabis. So they also were changing their social networks in terms of not hanging out with those people who were using these substances as much. So overall, we saw improvements on many things for both groups and then some specific ones for TACUNA. This, I think, is the most exciting finding. We did not see differences between the 1 hour versus 2 hour, which really highlights sustainability and feasibility of this program. And then I want to talk a little bit about cost effectiveness. So we have a couple of amazing economists on this project, Dr. Rosanna Smart and Dr. Sam Mann, and they were working to understand what does TACUNA cost and kind of how much does it cost to implement this? What's it going to cost to providers? And we have some papers out there on this. And then we did an analysis to understand if we implemented TACUNA across the United States for every Native American emerging adult, what would that cost? For those of us that do prevention, this is near and dear to our hearts. We know we can save money if we do prevention, and that is what this shows. So in that first year, it's going to cost you, right? $171 million to implement this. That's a lot of money. But as you can see, if you look over 10 years, year 2, it costs $65 million. By year 3, we are already saving $78 million by having this program. And if you get down to 10 years out, we are saving billions of dollars. And these dollars are related to lost productivity, criminal justice, and healthcare costs. So, wow, big savings. So what can we conclude? TACUNA reached a large and diverse sample of American Indian Alaska Native emerging adults across the US at a critical developmental period. We know this is a really important developmental period, and there's long-term benefits to decreasing use through adulthood. We had significant reductions in drinking and cannabis use and mental health, and lo and behold, virtual delivery worked. And this short version was as effective as the longer version, which really makes TACUNA cost effective. And most importantly, which Dr. Johnson is going to get into next, is how, because TACUNA is community driven, this increases both sustainability and feasibility. And that's the goal. When the money runs out, we want people to be able to do this program. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson now to talk more about that.
Okay, so where do we go from here? So dissemination isn't just about publishing research. It's about making sure that TACUNA actually reaches the community in ways that are accessible and meaningful. So one of the things that we're doing is putting TACUNA on a website it's groupmiforteens.org. And Dr. Demikio has many other of her interventions on this website. There's Makune's on the website as well. And we have been working on developing the video that walks through the three workshops on TACUNA so that individuals and programs can see what it looks like in practice. So we actually we're working on that this Saturday, and hopefully it'll be up in a few months. Another piece is how we translate our research. So we take our publications and turn them into these simple, community-friendly one-pagers that highlights the key points so the information is understandable and usable. Ultimately, this is about bridging research and real-world impact, making sure that cultural-based interventions like TACUNA don't just stay in journals, but actually support healing in our communities. So the next slide shows what dissemination looks like for us in real life. So this is Dr. Dickerson and I attending one of our powwows, because dissemination is not just online or in publications. It's being out in the community, whether, again, that's at powwows, health fairs, our community gatherings. We're showing up and sharing this work directly with our people. We bring our poster boards, our one-pagers, and we talk with community members about what TACUNA is and how it can support them. And what's important is that it's relational. It's not just handing out information. It's having conversations, answering questions, and creating space for connection. Because for us, dissemination is about meeting people where they're at and making sure that this work is accessible, relevant, and grounded in community. So what we're seeing is that urban American Indian and Alaska Native communities are actively asking for cultural-based interventions. There's a clear need for services that reflect culture, identity, and lived experience. At the same time, many clinics aren't fully engaged with research teams, which can create gaps between what is being studied and what is actually needed in practice. Clinic involvement is what really makes research possible, because we are looking for ways to engage communities in respectful and appropriate ways so that they can focus on intervention and research projects that work for them. At Sacred Path, we approach research differently. We study our own interventions, like our drum and dance workshop, to make sure the work isn't only evidence-based, but truly meaningful and helpful for our community. So it's about making sure research translates into real care, real connection, and real impact. So we strongly believe that community-based research works, and not just in theory, but in practice. At Sacred Path, our work has shown that when you intentionally involve community at every stage of research, the outcomes are stronger, more relevant, and actually usable. It allows us to better serve urban American Indian Alaska Native communities in ways that are culturally grounded and responsive to real needs. One of the ways that we do this is through focus groups. We don't assume we know what the community needs, we ask. We create space for people to share their perspectives, their experiences, and what actually will be helpful for them. That directly shapes how we design interventions like TACUNA. We also really rely on our Elder Advisory Board. Their role is critical. They provide guidance, cultural insight, and accountability to ensure that the work stays aligned with traditional values and teachings. That grounding is something you can't replicate without true community involvement. Another important piece is recruitment. Like Dr. Dickerson said, we've had to change ways that we were doing recruitment, get different flyers that maybe work better for the community. So we always have to rethink building trust, showing up consistently, and making sure people feel safe and respected in the process. We also have made it a priority to involve community leaders in our publications. This is about shifting who holds knowledge and who gets recognized. Community voices should not just inform the research, they should be part of how it's shared and represented. And throughout all of this, we are constantly identifying and addressing barriers that comes up in our projects, whether that's access, trust, stigma, or systemic challenges. What we've learned is that this work is done with community rather on community. It becomes more than just a research project. It becomes a tool for connection, for healing, and for real change. So next, we move from research into action. So for us, this work the research is really never the end goal. It's really the starting point for implementation of these projects. From the beginning, we design our research with implementation in mind, asking, how will this actually be used in real world settings? We know that implementing culturally tailored programs is critical. Our communities are asking for these types of interventions, and when we provide them, they better address the needs of urban American Indian, Alaska Native individuals and families. At the same time, implementation isn't a one-size-fits-all. When you bring a program into a different clinic or community settings, there are always adjustments that needs to be made, whether that's how it's delivered, who it's delivered, or how it's integrated into existing services. That flexibility is key. What we've done at Sacred Path, we used our publications and data, and we wrote a grant that we got funded for to implement Makune. That's the other intervention program that's also on the website, and it was for ages 14 to 18, and on the website in the manual that you'll see, it's a 2 hours. But again, like that was talked about with TACUNA, that didn't really work. We tried it, and many of the youth didn't continue for all the 3 workshops. So we changed it to 1 hour workshops. And we also started offering to individuals over 18 as well. So they wanted to have that work, the Makune workshop too. When TACUNA starts, we'll start implementing TACUNA to that age group. So that's the goal, is not just to generate knowledge, but to turn that knowledge into programs that are actually reaching people. Because ultimately research should lead to implementation, and implementation should lead to better outcomes for our communities. So this final slide just looks at how we have put these interventions into practice. And one example, again, is NADAR. It's the Native American Drum Dance and Regalia program. We've been evaluating this program for the past 6 years with funding from the state of California. And we've seen that it is highly effective for our community in Los Angeles. It's grounded in culture, in identity, and in community. And that's exactly why it works. We did, again, focus groups. We continuously do focus groups and bring in the community to say, what do we need to change this year? What do we need to add? So we keep on improving NADAR to make sure it best fits our community. And then, of course, Makune, we're implementing, and we've been implementing now for the last 4 years in California. It's really effective. We do it about 3 times a year, and we do it virtually. And then there's NCREW. It's the Native Collective Research effort to enhance wellness. And through this NIH-funded effort, Sacred Path, in partnership with RAND, is providing technical assistance to tribes and Native serving organizations across the country. What's important about this work is that it's not just about us doing research, it's about building capacity so that our communities can do their own research, evaluate their own programs, and determine what works best for them in their communities. And so if you really think about everything that we talked about, from just the implementation, community engagement, the research, the dissemination, there's really a common thread. This work is about making sure that culturally grounded interventions don't just stay in research, but they reach the community, they are implemented in practice, and they lead to real healing. When we center culture, involve community, and stay committed to translating research into action, we're just not building programs, we're strengthening the health and well-being and the future of our communities. So thank you all. And we would really like to also thank all our partners that have been involved with us throughout all these years of evaluating these culturally based interventions.
Well, isn't that fantastic? We're so grateful for hearing about this amazing project and all of the work that you're doing and the long-standing commitment to collaborating deeply with community members to come up with projects and approaches that are likely to maximize the benefits for those communities, and for not only wanting to rigorously investigate this using the best practices of the research, but of course also to then harness the positive benefits and findings from that research to try to reach back in and make a difference in the community as well. So you kind of got the full circle going on there, which is so impressive and so important. I think we're really fortunate to learn a lot more about this. So thank you. We've got a number of questions and answers. If you have additional questions and answers in our audience, which it's like over 160 people today, please feel free to post your question or comment that I can then look at and forward along to our research team here today. One thing I wanted to get us started with, however, is we have a very eclectic number of people. They come from, colleagues in my departments here to providers of services in Indian country, distant places. And so sometimes it's helpful to provide some of the common background for folks to have a grasp of all that we're talking about. You've harnessed a motivational interview. And of course, people who are engaged in substance abuse treatment or in substance abuse treatment research know all about motivational interviewing, but a lot of folks might not exactly know what that is. So I wonder if you could talk through a bit about motivational interviewing, its logic, its rationale, what it's trying to accomplish, how it's usually delivered, and then the ways in which you were able to tap into or harness it for purposes of these, 1 hour kind of training sort of workshops. I wonder, Dr. D'Amico, perhaps you would like to tackle that one, or if not, pass it along to whomever.
I'm sure I can start. I think that this is work that is so important for this developmental age group, because I think adolescents often get told what to do, clean your room, do your homework, right? And none of us really like getting told what to do. And so it's just really developmentally appropriate to let people feel empowered about making their own choice. And really what our programs say is, we can provide you with information and we can talk about this, but it's your choice. You have to decide for yourself. And you'll see on our Group MI website, we have the programs, we have a lot of resources up there, and everything is free. There's training videos. As Dr. Johnson said, we're finishing our training videos for TACUNA. But I think that that's really important for this age group. And what we've seen across our interventions is that when you take this approach, adolescents don't know it's motivational interviewing, but the satisfaction is high, and they say things like, the facilitator listened to me, the facilitator respected where I was at with my substance use. They say the things that we know motivational interviewing is about, and they feel very comfortable and safe in these workshops. And that's really, I think, what is critically important.
Yeah, I'll add a couple more comments. I think MI is one of the more really well-received evidence-based treatments out there for Native Americans as it relates to substance use because it's really collaborative. You're not the expert. You don't play expert role as a provider. It's collaborative. It's a team approach between you and the clients. And it really provides an opportunity for someone to be heard, especially young people. I mean, society says just be quiet. You don't know anything. But here they have a voice, have a big voice, have a lot of important things to share, especially with being Native American, being able to have that opportunity just to express your thoughts and for a provider to then listen to challenges you may not hear often enough. And Dr. Kamala Venner at University of New Mexico and Dr. Dale Walker both have manuals recognizing how the community likes MI as well.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. Do you have anything to add about how MI was sort of harnessed and then offered to Native folks in these communities in these, through the virtual workshop format, which, it's called motivational interviewing. How do you do interviews in a group sort of virtual format? If it's not an interview, then how is it adapted in that way?
I think that we have amazing facilitators that have really learned to do this virtually and have had, many years of practice in doing this. And then we have these facilitators also working with, in our Makune, when we do the Makune project, we have young adults. So they're younger than 26 that have learned to do this. And they're just quite amazing at interacting, kind of like it's more peer-to-peer work when they're doing these workshops. And it just works out really well. I think it's also the integration of the cultural components, like they learn about sage and traditional food, so they bring in that cultural component. I think that also really works well with motivational interviewing.
Thank you for that. A related question is that we've talked up how important it was that you've done a randomized controlled trial in RCT. Not everyone who's watching this particular presentation necessarily knows what a randomized controlled trial is or why it's considered the gold standard. As you said, Dr. D'Amico, I wonder, Dr. Dickerson, if you want to just explain a little more why an RCT? Why isn't it done all the time? What makes it hard to do with our populations?
Right. Yeah. I'd have to preface that, RCTs are not, perhaps a gold standard for Native Americans, and other racial ethnic groups. It's been around maybe the longest. It's a convenient, straightforward approach where you have a promising intervention compared to a placebo, right? I mean, if you have medications, you have a water pill, whatever, a fake pill versus something that could be great. So with Native Americans, the early trials that when you have something where when you have an intervention addressing a health disparity that exists in Native American communities, to just offer a water pill or a placebo, that's not really, first of all, ethical, and second of all, of benefit to the community. So early on in research, this kind of approach kind of left some communities feeling hung out to dry. Researchers would come in, they do a promising study and kind of leave without, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, not being able to disseminate or implement the programs. So, as Dr. D'Amico mentioned, we tried to design a study design that had potential benefits in each category. TACUNA, we would think a little bit more because it's a little more really in tune with some focus group feedback and more material. But we still try to make it, really more ethically designed. But there are other study designs, I think, out there that researchers are trying to use.
If I could
Terrific.
add to that, if that's okay, I think that all my work is in communities, and I think, you know, when you look at academia and, grant funding, that's what they expect to see, right? They expect to see this gold standard. And so we, as those that work in the community, have to think about how can we do this, but make it fit and comfortable for the community. So in all of my work, we never have a control group, or if we do, we make sure everyone gets the intervention, right? So you're going to get it this year, and then you're going to get it next year. Everyone's going to get it, because when you're working in communities, you need to think about these things. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, like Dr. Dickerson was saying, but yeah, maybe it costs more, but it's critically important if you want to do the work and be able to continue to work in these communities. There has to be benefits, and it has to be ethical.
Thanks for that. And of course, one reason why the RCT is often thought to be a gold standard is because it tries to isolate cause and effect relationships in a way that, actually casually off the tops of our heads, it can be very confounded to draw conclusions that are confident about whether something works to help people. Dr. Johnson, it's interesting because you talked about the importance of the cultural component. And, I bet there are people on the meeting today who are just wondering, well, why bother to do the motivational interviewing part? Why not just the cultural part? Maybe that's in fact what is making the difference for these young people. What are your thoughts about that?
That's a great question because I think, we hear from participants that, and first of all, there's a whole different the participants that are in these interventions can be really different. Some are really connected to the culture, some are not connected to the culture, some use substances, some don't. So they're all very, really different perspectives. And I think that's what really is important part of the program, are all these different perspectives of the youth and young people that participate, is that they come in and they just kind of seem to form connections with each other through the cultural component part mainly, which is really interesting. It's just discussing the culture and what they may learn from their parents, or what they don't know, and so it's that connection that's really powerful. And so that's a really interesting question, is it the motivational interviewing? What are your thoughts, Dr. Dickerson or Dr. D'Amico?
Gee, thanks, Dr. Johnson. No, yeah, no, I think I have various thoughts, but I think there's a need. All this research is new. This is one design. We're looking at MI that's well received with Native Americans. So the thought is, what if you amp it up with traditional practices and vice versa? Traditional practices perhaps amp it up with useful content such as MI. Can that be even, a really good idea? And the results so far show really a lot of promise. But then it begs the question you mentioned: what if you just had the workshops, the tradition, just culture, and versus some other idea? I think those are good questions for future projects. And same with medication, other, I don't know, depression or alcohol cravings, and culture, it just makes you think, we're dealing with, I don't know, then it goes down to, is this a culture-based, spiritual-based disease, a medical, biological thing? So there's a lot of, what's the underlying mechanisms we're wanting to improve, really? How do we best tackle I don't know, tackle the disease versus spiritual, cultural, multidimensional? Is it multidimensional, right? Um, so I don't know, that confuses things more, but
Well, I think it's a good question, though, because I think, to me, motivational interviewing is how you are working with young people. You're working with them in a collaborative, non-judgmental way. So when Dr. Johnson is talking about the culture part, we have young people come in who they don't know their tribe. We have young people come in who are dancers. And so you want to make people feel comfortable no matter where they're at. And that I think is where the MI comes in. And same with substance use. You don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable if they're using if someone else isn't. And so you want to make people feel like where they're at is okay and they can make different choices if they're ready. So, like for the culture, we'll say, well, what would you like to do to maybe try to do more cultural activities? And one of the young people might say, oh, I have this thing and we do this and you could join me. And so they have that peer support. Or, if you wanted to cut back, what would that look like? And someone else might say, yeah, I used to use and this is what I did. And so I think that's where the MI comes in is really ensuring everyone feels comfortable because everyone's coming in a different place. And we have to be aware of that. And as Dr. Johnson said, our facilitators are amazing because you don't know what you're going to get. It's different people every time in those workshops. So you have to be really prepared.
Wonderful. I want to turn to some of the comments and questions. So we have a kind of testimonial from Danielle Coast who writes in, I just want to say thank you, Miigwech, for this work. As someone who grew up outside of my community, maintaining that connection to culture is challenging, but so fundamental in healing. So appreciation for what you're doing here. We also have some questions that are just more like informational. Christina Parker writes, good morning. My name is Christina Parker. I work with the Yakima Nation Behavioral Health. I was just wondering what the eligibility criteria were for the survey participants.
Well, I'll add a couple, the participants, they needed to self-identify to as Native, because we think that's the way to do it, rather than asking for BIA papers and we self-identification for sure. Having living off a reservation village or rancheria. And you do not have to actively no specific substance use requirements in order to capture, as Dr. D'Amico mentioned, the full gamut of our population to help prevent anyone who's either using or not using, thinking about using.
Right.
Yeah.
We just had we this was part of the HEAL initiative funding, helping end addiction long term. So it was focused on opioid misuse. So if anyone screened in with an opioid use disorder, then we provided them with referral to treatment. So that was the only, but otherwise you could have a range of substance use.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Judith Arroyo, who many of us know and retired from the IAAA and NIH. That question is, were participants able to see each other virtually when they participated? The FaceTime effect might be positive.
Yes, I'll start off. Great to hear from you, Judy. It's really great. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well. Yes, so yeah, we did see people's faces. Dr. D'Amico and I actually we listened to all the most of the tapes, all the tapes for fidelity and to for training purposes. But the facilitators did, so we heard, but the facilitators did see participants. Participants did see each other. They were able to kind of have that, so we think closer connection. Um, but I have to add a comment. Dr. D'Amico mentioned it was really amazing from our perspective to see people in the same workshop, perhaps from Arkansas, Oregon, and Alaska, all together in the same workshop, different accents, but speaking the same language. Having from just observation, really expressing similar challenges and desires and thoughts about the culture. Um, so yes, that part was really great to see.
Well, and as you can imagine, with all the time differences, we had to time the workshops for all those time zones. right? Because you don't want someone cooking at 1 a.m. in the morning on the East Coast. I mean, they're young people, they're probably up anyway, but you got to be realistic. So we had to think about that, right? For Hawaii, right? West Coast, middle. So it was kind of interesting finding that sweet spot of the timing of the workshops.
Wonderful. And Ed Fisher writes in the slide that was shared concerning participation, there were a couple of areas of low participation that stand out. Any idea why those states had lower participation?
Well, we did, I'll start off, we did have more, we did have more pre-existing relationships with Pacific Northwest, Southwest, Upper Midwest, or a bit. Not as many established relationships, have to admit, with the East Coast. So we're hoping in future work that could be addressed more. This was not, this was quickly pivoted and changed. So initially we were in California, all of our attention was there, and then we quickly said, "Oh, we know this person here, and we know Shadow Indian Health Board. We know so whoever we knew, we tried to quickly team up with, and if we would have had a little bit more time, we could have looked a bit further in some of the other states as well."
Well, and honestly, when you think back to 6 years ago, I mean, now it seems like, oh, online recruiting. Well, we're used to going to powwows, we're used to engaging in person for recruitment. So to actually like place a social media ad on Instagram and have 141 people sign up and be eligible in 1 week was mind-blowing. Um, and I think that we learned a lot over this trial of how to do this. Which I think now it feels like old hat, but back in the day, we were like, what are we doing?
Well, and Dr. Johnson, I'm wondering on that note, because this was done virtually and over, Zoom or virtual technology, I'm wondering how the cultural stuff was sort of handled there. I know one of the workshops, workshop 3, I think you said, was based on spirituality, and some of our communities, there's hesitation and concerns about spiritual sacred stuff being communicated or recorded or in any way mediated outside of maybe the face-to-face or the in-person. So how did the cultural presentation and packaging and all of that work in terms of the virtual stuff?
I think it went really well. We sent them sage. And so it was really about understanding the importance of our, medicines. So what our medicines are used for, what sage is used for. The facilitator's really great at explaining it and the meaning behind it. And he shows them, he lights it and he shows them how to smudge and again, you get communication from the young people saying that, yeah, I use sage. I use sage all the time. I pray, every morning with sage, burn sage. And then there's others that say, I haven't. This is the first time I've ever had sage or I'm using sage. And so they just share and talk about it together. So I don't, I think that part goes really well.
Terrific. We have another testimonial here from Anthony Stately. Gee Miigwech for your work. I'm really proud that NAC had the privilege to be one of the sites participating in this work. These are amazing results. We're launching our youth-focused substance use disorder prevention programming this spring, and this will inform the work we do in a demonstrable manner. So, fantastic.
Great.
And, here's a question from Daryl Joseph. In applying quantitative and qualitative data analyses, were any contradictions observed between the findings? And if so, how did the project team resolve or interpret discrepancies that might have arisen?
Do you want to take that, Dan? Or do you want me to? Or
Yeah, you start. Yeah. I can't
No,
think
I
of.
think that's a really good question. We have Dr. Alina Palomaru and Dr. Ryan Brown were our kind of qualitative methodologists on the project. And um, it's actually amazing how the data fit together. Quite honestly, we didn't see discrepancies. It was, like you would see in the qualitative, because we did not only interviews, but we did qualitative on our survey, which was really awesome. So we asked people like, what did you like about the program? What didn't you like? And so a lot of people would say, I am making changes in my social networks because that was really, I saw this and it was like, wow, I needed to make changes. I really want to, engage in more traditional practices. And then we saw that, right, in the outcomes. And we have a couple papers where we use mixed methods, really looking at satisfaction of the intervention from both quant and qual. And I just think that is just a beautiful way to be able to um, just kind of spread out isn't the right word. I don't know. I think it just makes it more juicy when you have both things together, because it just highlights how they fit. So we didn't see discrepancies.
And Justin Knight writes in, thanks for the amazing work on this project. I'm a mixed heritage Cree PhD student researching urban indigenous healing from addictions in Saskatchewan. My question is regarding the higher rates of negative consequences of cannabis use, which I assumed would be lower than alcohol. Can you provide some general examples of this? Negative
Oh, of the types of
consequences
consequences?
of cannabis use,
I
especially
think,
relative to alcohol. Yeah.
right. Yeah, we were kind of thinking about that when we were looking at some of the results, and we're thinking it's possible some participants may have recognized more about the consequence, as they self-explored their own use patterns and their social connections and involvement with community. They may have built some awareness to what it's doing, how it's impacting their life, how it's impacting their goals, and might have had some that I think in the health and wellness group, perhaps a bit more. There may have been
Yeah.
a bit more of some realization.
But I mean, the consequences are kind of similar. I mean, obviously, there's different ones for different substances. So, like for cannabis, we would say difficulty concentrating, for example, whereas alcohol might be a blackout or passing out. But a lot of them were similar across, like social consequences, right? Doing things you regretted, right? Damaging relationships. So we did have similar ones across both. So, and this is something, we're seeing across all my studies with young people, even in states where it's not legal. We see more cannabis use and more cannabis consequences. So I just think it's so important that we discuss this substance with young people because it's just viewed so differently than alcohol.
Yeah. Dr. Johnson, here's a follow-up question from Guadalupe Ramos, who writes, how do you manage work with participants who use and don't use substances within the same group?
I think that that's what makes it so effective. And having a facilitator that can make them feel safe and okay with whether they are using or they don't use, or they're in the to culture or they're not, that it's all okay. And so with like Dr. Amiku said, a part of motivational interviewing is making them feel safe and um and and that it's okay. It's okay. That's what kind of brings that group dynamic together, is the facilitator making them feel safe no matter where they're at. And it just really works out in terms of and it is really having a really good facilitator to make participants feel okay no matter again where they're at. So
Thanks. I wonder if you could speak just a bit to some of the outcomes that you talked about. So you said everyone, of course, benefited because even if they weren't part of the getting the motivational interviewing stuff, they were getting a kind of cultural wellness workshop. But and everyone benefited, and there were of course differences in some people having benefits who got the motivational interviewing. And you showed the slides where we could see those curves differed in striking ways. This is such a modest intervention in the sense of it's only for sort of 1 hour, so it's 4 hours, right? 4 hours of programming or what have you. And you didn't talk about effect sizes as such. Now, effect sizes for those of us in science are ways of quantifying how strong that effect is. And you wouldn't expect really strong effects from 4 hours of stuff like this, but can you say more about effect sizes and how like clinically significant do you think some of these differences might have been?
Well, I just have one quick comment. I think motivational interviewing, and Dr. D'Amico is amazing expert in MI, but I think there are different studies that showed short sessions of MI have some robust findings. So that might be one explanation to the findings. There are ways to use MI where you don't have to sit there for 3 months and ponder the universe so heavily. So yeah, so some brief MI-ish kind of approaches have shown benefit. Any other thoughts, Dr. Rico?
I was just thinking about like how, for the 4 hours, I hear and see a lot of people that come to like our workshops, our drum and dance workshops, or our beading workshop. Like some have said, they say, they've been seeing a therapist or whatever, but they say what has made the big difference for them and what has changed them so much is when they attended our beading workshop. And one person in our drum and dance said, what really changed and helped me the most was when I picked up the drumstick. So that's like way less than 4 hours. It's just that connection to culture and that connection to community that really helps.
Well, and I think, our statistician isn't on. I'm not a statistician, but I will say I'm glad you brought up the clinical significance because I do think this is more than statistical significance. When you're seeing rates of depression, clinically significant depression and anxiety decrease, that is huge. When you're seeing rates of cannabis use disorder and alcohol use disorder decrease, that is huge, right? So the clinical significance, I think, like one more person without that is awesome. And I wanna say it's 3 hours of TACUNA and 1 hour for the cultural health and wellness. So people who improved with just 1 hour of cultural health and wellness, right? That is cost effective too. And so I think that the clinical significance is there as well. And I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes we get caught up for those of us, over the P.05, but I'm a clinician and I want to know what does that mean? Like, so good question.
Thanks, fantastic. And as you've got that economic analysis, which you reported on, that's very exciting as well, and so important as we think about this kind of work. So looking forward to that analysis coming out. Sid West wrote in, I work on a longitudinal observational study, the Strong Heart Study, with over 35 years in the field with 12 tribal communities. Any suggestions on how we can better communicate the importance of collecting data over a long period? They're looking for results, interventions, and there have been many, but somehow they are not connecting with our study in terms of like you assessed follow-up for a year. It'd be interesting, of course, to know. Everyone would want to know, well, what about 10 years? What about 20 years, right?
I know Dr. D'Amico's has a lot of experience with longitudinal studies. Do you have any comments, Dr. D'Amico?
Yeah. Well, I was going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson because I love when she goes into the communities, she actually talks about these very things, about the importance of this data. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that because I think it's important for the community to understand why do we need this data?
Yeah, when we started really focusing on research and looking at all of these workshops and everything that we are doing, we really had to engage the community and we really had to let the community know what we're doing in terms of the research and why it's so important. And, you know, if the community and your organization staff don't understand what you're doing, it's not going to be really beneficial. And so what we do is like we have a research 101 presentations that we go out and do. You know, it's just like even with the dissemination, right? We're out there, so we're showing this is what we found. We let you know we were doing this research project. This is how we wanted you to be involved, and now we're giving back. See, this is how important research is, so we can continue doing it. Like our NADAR, we're on our 6th year of collecting data on our drum and dance program, and the community is really supportive of it. And so it's just really involving the community and gaining that trust and, you know, respect within the community, within your community.
Thank you. We're winding down. This will be the last question here, and we've got students, we've got people who are wondering about maybe our own biographies. So one of us is a psychiatrist, the rest of us are trained as clinical psychologists, and we've come into these careers to do this work. And folks kind of want to know, well, how did you end up coming into doing this work? What prepared you? What motivated you? What was it like? Now we could do a whole session on that alone, but maybe in 20 or 30 seconds each, you could just reflect a bit on how you got to where you are to do this work.
Early on when I was in ANAMS, Association of Native American Medical Students, part of the Association of American Indian Physicians, AAIP, I went to some AAIP meetings way back, I don't know, late 90s, I think. And I started hearing, from other Native doctors about their careers at these conferences, and researchers, and it sparked my interest, what they were able to do in their clinical life as a clinician. Some were researchers. So I spoke with some, sometimes you have to go up to these people when you're in training, walk up there to their wherever podium they're at and start a conversation and, see what you could learn and how you could develop your own career interests.
Terrific. Dr. D'Amico?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always loved working with adolescents. I think they are the funnest age. I'm also a mom, so I have my own adolescent children, and yes, I do use motivational interviewing on them. But I think for me it was just like young people are so amazing, and and we want them to be successful. So how, making these programs in the community for me is really quite fun. I absolutely love it. So that's what kind of drew me to the clinical part.
Great. Dr. Johnson?
I think for myself, it's just being Native American and just seeing a lot that's going on in our community. I wanted to be, there to see what I could do to help our community and work within the community.
Fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and to get three of you at once is a real treat, to benefit from your perspectives and your expertise and all that you've learned and done in this work. And it's a fantastic opportunity to have shared it with so many of our community at HUNAP and in the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine and beyond. So thank you very much for joining us. Our next Indigenous Health and Wellbeing Colloquium will be scheduled sometime in the fall semester. So just stay tuned for that. We don't have it set up yet, but as always, I try to, announce this stuff like 3 times. Forgive me if it's burdening your inbox, but I want to make sure that people who are interested in this stuff have a chance to attend and benefit from the wisdom and information we share. And of course, I want to thank my colleagues and staff at the Harvard University Native American Program, especially Ale Rincon, who's on this and who organizes this and who keeps everything in line for me at HUNAP. Thank you, Ale. And in the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine, to my colleagues and our staff over there who support this seminar and have since its very inception, some 5 years ago. So thank you, everyone. Our colloquium today is at an end, and I really, again, thank you for your participation, Drs. Dickerson, D'Amico, and Johnson. So long, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for
Thank
having
you.
us.